Hello and welcome back to the Nathan Trust HR People Services podcast. I'm joined again today by Christine Sutton, Head of HR at Nathan Trust. Today we're going to look into the world of hiring staff, how difficult it is, how to get it right, and what to do when you get it wrong. So, Christine, what advice would you have for someone looking to hire staff, and what's the first part of the process that you take them through?
Well, I suppose what we want to kind of talk about today and look at is really, maybe being a little bit more innovative in the strategies that we employ in recruitment and talent acquisition, and really just the benefits of a multi-method approach to recruitment. Looking at, maybe some of the areas that people will skip, such as job analysis, and also maybe integrating psychometrics into the hiring process. I think for me, one of the most fundamental first steps that organizations need to undertake is to conduct a job analysis. So it's about collecting and documenting and analysing information about, well, what does the job actually require? What are the responsibilities of it? And what does a successful person look like in this particular role? What are the key characteristics that someone needs to possess? And this is, I suppose I often describe leaving a job analysis out as like building a building with no foundation. Job analysis is the cornerstone of an effective recruitment strategy. And when we understand the intricacies of a particular job, then we can tailor the recruitment process to attract candidates who possess the necessary skills, qualifications, and also the attributes in order to excel in that role. Quite often organizations will just, they'll list the duties and qualifications. They will conduct an interview, which is probably quite unreliable in predicting future performance, and evidence and research would back up, I suppose, that assertion. So, first off, we want to identify, well, what are the competencies for the role? What are the personality traits? What cognitive abilities do people need to be successful in a specific job role? So that, I suppose, for me is the first step of an effective recruitment process, is understanding what exactly is it we're recruiting for.
Yeah. And I suppose in a lot of companies, the role that they're recruiting for, they know it's going to change and grow very quickly as well. So, I mean, it's not always easy, I suppose. And sometimes they actually probably need to hire 2 and 3 people that are trying to fit a job analysis into one.
Yeah, no, I think what is, and again, it's a failing to, right, we've recruited for this role before, so surely it's just the same. No, jobs evolve and change over time. So, each time you need to relook at that analysis to say, is this still fit for purpose? What do we need to change? What do we need to add to ensure that we're getting the right person into the role? There is a process, and I suppose there is a science to it, in that you're looking at doing your analysis and gathering that evidence first. You then determine what methods are going to help us to, recruit the best person for the job, but also evaluating your process. Again, people often skip that part out. And that evaluation can come into play. And, when the person is in situ, how well are they performing? Does the person pass their probation? And quite often, if you're finding that, perhaps people aren't making it through probation, you need to look at your hiring process and kind of say, what are we doing wrong at this point that we're not effectively able to recruit candidates that are appropriate for this role?
Okay. So I mean, that's your first, is getting the analysis of what the job is, and then finding how you're going to communicate that job out, as you said. Once you've got your candidates, how many candidates should a company be looking at, or is it how long is a piece of string? And then the process of going through those candidates. I mean, I see some companies might have 4 or 5 interviews, even more. Other
Mhm.
companies, 2, 1. What are you seeing? What do you
You're,
recommend?
there's no kind of set best way to do it, and that's the whole point of looking at it from a scientific perspective. So once you know what it is that you're looking for, and you've gone through that advertising and I suppose shortlisting process, you also need to determine what methods am I going to use to assess these candidates. So that's where you kind of consider, well, we might utilize an assessment center where we put them through a battery of tests, and perhaps some tasks that they might be required to do as part of the role to see how they perform doing those tasks. Or we might do an interview, we might choose to do some psychometrics, some cognitive testing, and then we may choose to have the person do, say, a presentation or a sales pitch if you're hiring for, for example, for a sales role. So it's not one size doesn't fit all. It's about tailoring your approach to each role that you're recruiting for.
Yeah, I suppose from the company's point of view, they want to be as thorough as possible and carry out as many exercises as they can and assessments. But from I suppose, the candidate's point of view, it can be quite frustrating if they're 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, there's a happy medium that I suppose you'd ideally search for
Mhm.
there.
Yeah, you want to balance both, and quite often companies, they sometimes they'll do one interview and they're done, and that's their process. But for me, I suppose I like evidence. But also, as you rightly kind of said, you do need to look at it from a candidate's perspective, and candidate experience is everything, because candidate will ultimately decide, do I want to work for this company? What was my experience like as part of that recruitment process? And that's why it's very important to be upfront with people at the beginning when you're selecting them for interview, that they understand exactly what your process is going to be. For example, our process involves, for example, say, well, you'll have to attend 2 interviews. One will be online, the second will be in person, and we'd like you to complete a psychometric test or personality test as well, so that they know, right, that's what I can expect from this process, that it's not a case of they're going into it, uncertain as to what the process is going to be, that you do an interview and then all of a sudden, we want you to do another interview. After that, there's a couple more people that we think you need to speak to. That is extremely frustrating from a candidate's perspective. So you really have to weigh those up to say, how can we appropriately assess this candidate? Taking into consideration candidate experience as well, that they have a positive experience and can showcase their skills when it comes to this particular job. And I've been on both sides where I've been really unclear and as to, what is the process. And again, that to me, it raises alarm bells, to be honest. And I think that's candidates really need to look at, right, well, if that's the recruitment process, what's it going to be like working in that company? And your recruitment process can often be reflective of that. So if it's quite disorganized and unclear, what does that say about the company?
So show the plan from day one. Yeah. Rather than.
Very, very simple. Just set expectations and meet those expectations.
And what about in the situation where there is a bad hire? I suppose earlier you said if it happens a lot, you've got to question your systems. But is there what's the process there?
Well, I suppose that's almost the next step, and that's after the hire. And that again, you need to have appropriate processes in, and we probably will do a whole podcast on that. Right. But if you do experience that, you do need to look back and say, right, well, what decisions were made and how did we make those decisions? I think if we can bring it back to the, that recruitment and selection process.
Yeah. Just getting in the selection process, a number of candidates, as I was saying earlier. I mean, certain jobs will obviously, attract dozens or hundreds of inquiries. Do you have time to go through them all? What is the best process? I mean, I read about AI being used to read CVs these days. I don't know what your opinions on that is, but yeah, how do you delve through all the candidates day one?
That can be, again, to me, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Are you potentially missing out on people? I think your process needs to be very mindful of recruiting the best candidate, but because they didn't use a keyword in their CV, you might be missing out on somebody that's really good. So I think utilizing, and quite often when an organization has high volume recruitment for a particular role, they may employ some psychometric tests as a way of I suppose streamlining that process to kind of whittle it down to the best candidates. But again, you need to be very, very mindful that your recruitment process is not biased in any way, or that you can try and mitigate against potential bias to ensure that you're recruiting from as diverse a pool as possible for your organization. It's much better for organizations that you've got a diverse group of employees. Just from an experience perspective, again, for your employees, that everybody doesn't think exactly the same way, that you're not recruiting like for like, and that you're recruiting people that bring different things to the organization.
Okay, and when your the assessment process that happens when you're recruiting the candidate, does that continue for the probation period, or is there a different form of assessments you're going to use in the first 6 months?
Again, I suppose we're probably jumping ahead to onboarding. So you'd have a separate process for when somebody is actually hired. And when you're onboarding that person, you should have a set process so that people have an experience when they're joining your company. But I suppose that's kind of almost jumping ahead to, again, after the hire.
Okay, yeah. I'm very eager to get through the process and in my head. So do you have any other advice for new companies or anyone looking at the moment just to
Yeah,
take on new hires?
we have lots of companies that that we work with in terms of designing their recruitment process, designing what it should look like. And again, as I said, that starts with the job analysis, understanding the key skills, the qualifications, the competencies, the behaviors, and then incorporating psychometric assessments to allow the companies to gain deeper insights into candidates' capabilities, their preferences, and how they will fit into that role. And I suppose what those things do is that they provide objective data that can complement, I suppose, our traditional selection methods, such as interviews, and I suppose reviewing somebody's CV. And I think you have to be really flexible with that process. So other things that I think people need to be mindful for is the methods and the assessment tools that they're using, that they're using the right tools. And that's obviously why, obviously I'm qualified in a number of different psychometrics and can help advise with what might be the best tool to use, but that they're using tools that are reputable, and that many of them do undergo rigorous validation processes to ensure their reliability and validity and fairness across diverse populations. Some psychometrics are not designed to be used in recruitment processes, and I think it's quite it's not ethical to use them in recruitment processes. So it is important that you partner with trusted assessment providers, you adhere to best practice when it comes to assessment administration, interpretation as well, and that candidates get feedback on the assessments that they undertake. This, I suppose, enables people to minimize bias in their process and enhance the validity or the predictive validity of the recruitment process.
Yeah, because there seems to be an abundance of personality tests online available, free of charge, that are I don't know, yeah, are they being used? But are you seeing them being used?
No, personally, I'm not seeing them being used, and maybe, some people do use them. I personally have never seen them being used. I've always, and I've always recommended that, there is a list, and certainly I'm BPS qualified, British Psychological Society, so you can almost look up tests that are and people that are trained to appropriately administer these types of tests. So I think that's really important, that you're partnering with a trusted test and someone that can advise you appropriately on what is the best tool to use for that particular process. It's not a case of one test fits all. It's a case of, right, what's the level of the role? How many candidates do we have coming through? Is it high volume? Is it low volume? What characteristics are we looking for? So all of these things need to be tailored and kept in mind when it comes to your process. And certainly that's what we do. That's what I do. I look at the role and I tailor the process accordingly.
Okay, so it's important to use kind of peer-reviewed and proved tests, and get a professional to carry them out. Do you often find that companies or employers want to hire someone as soon as possible? I mean, I see that they need the role filled as fast as they can. How much pressure does that put on you? I mean, how fast can you work, I suppose?
Yeah, no, I would always kind of try and push against that. That's a pitfall, that there's a pressure to fill and let's just get somebody in without really kind of considering, and that can be a really costly mistake. And that, I think, is important to kind of to be able to let the client know that if they did do that, that there's a potential that, well, one, this is not the right person for the role, and that they're going to have to end up going through a whole recruitment process again, which we know isn't, it's not cheap to do a recruitment process. So if you're doing it, why not make sure you're doing it appropriately? Like, I think if you were buying, most companies, when they're buying a piece of equipment or when they're looking at a new IT system, they undergo a whole RFP process, and they do it in quite a methodical way. So why would you not employ a similar approach when you are recruiting employees, which is often one of your biggest, they are the biggest assets in the company, but they also, the cost of hiring somebody and the cost of salaries, that there seems to be almost a disconnect to the rigor that organizations will go through when they're looking at a piece of equipment versus, their most valuable asset, which is their people.
Yeah. Because I see it in certain businesses, it's hard to plan for their expansion. They might get like say, take, for example, a call center might win a large tender in the morning, and next thing they literally would be looking for a new building and a whole maybe team of 80 to 100 plus to be hired as soon as possible. That's I mean, that's a huge challenge for their HR departments.
Yeah, so it's almost like it's almost taking a step back and taking a pause and getting it right, and then going at speed, in that once you have your process perfected, you can move. You should then be able to move quickly. And again, if you're utilizing assessments, you're able to then ascertain who are the potential best candidates for the role. So it's just, and quite often for recruitment centres, they may, or for call centres, they may employ like assessment centers or different methods of recruitment where they can bring say, you know, a large number of people through an assessment center in one day.
Okay.
So that's again, it's about getting creative and also understanding what is available to them when it comes to recruitment. So if you're recruiting for a call center, you might then have assessments in place around looking at their ability to handle kind of difficult clients over the phone, and you'll test for that. You might do group interviews, etc., all of those types of things. So there's a multiple ways that you can assess a candidate's viability, and it's just about choosing the right one for you.
Yeah, having a process in place.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, I don't really have any more questions on the selection and assessment processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think, look, I think when it comes down to it, for me, the you know, I suppose to conclude or to kind of sum up, a multi-method approach is best. It allows an organization to, I suppose, to leverage the strengths of those different assessment techniques while also mitigating their individual limitations. So for example, while interviews might provide really valuable insights into candidates' communication skills and their interpersonal abilities, psychometrics offer objective measures of cognitive abilities and personality traits. So you can combine those in order to give you a more comprehensive picture of the candidate's suitability for the role in the organization. So for me, it's about blending that approach, blending both the qualitative and the quantitative, ensuring that you can enhance the validity and the reliability of your selection process, but also ensuring that candidates have a positive experience, that they're very clear on what's going to happen. So having that multi-method approach with a robust job analysis and the integration of psychometrics can really yield benefits for organizations who want to, you know, recruit top talent. So I suppose that's my 2 cents on it anyway.
Sounds good. Thanks for that. I have one last question before we end. Just in the selection process, who should be involved? You know, inside the companies, it's usually the managing director, or if it's for a specific team, should, you know, the team manager be involved and internal HR, or sometimes can it be overloaded with too many people?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's having somebody that has the experience and the ability to conduct a job analysis. So that's your first protocol. So you may involve HR in that process. You may involve existing incumbents. So for example, if you're recruiting for, you know, for a sales and marketing person, you might get someone who's doing the job already to almost help you sense check the job description as you have it. And obviously you definitely need to involve the hiring manager in that process. So again, it is about gathering information, and you gather the information from all those different parties in order to provide a really comprehensive picture of what that role should look like.
That makes sense, having someone who understands the process present. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone didn't have internal HR, you know, is it something that people can outsource?
Absolutely. You know, obviously we currently kind of, you know, even within Nathan Trust, like we overhauled our whole recruitment process to ensure that it is streamlined, that we have that every job is analysed before we recruit for it, that we determine, okay, what are the best selection methods to use for this process. And we also assist our clients in doing that as well. As I said, I'm accredited in a number of different psychometric tests, and for me, it's really important that recruitment is done in, I suppose, in a way that is ethical, but also that allows candidates from diverse backgrounds to, I suppose, to participate in the process. And I think it's all about being flexible with your process. It's all about ensuring that you're not limiting somebody from applying, again, like we talked about AI, because they didn't put a certain keyword on their CV. So I think it's just about finding a balance, utilizing technology, but also ensuring that that technology is not, I suppose, creating bias or adding bias to your process.
Makes sense. Sounds good. Well, thanks for your time again, Christine. Very informative. I look forward to our next podcast, whenever that will be. But for
No
now,
problem. Nice talking to you.
yeah, we'll see you again. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.